Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Go! The kick ahead, and Duffy's chasing it. The bounce sits up. The Dragons are steamrolling to week 2 of the finals.
Inside the last 10 seconds of the game, St George, Illawarra to the death, trying. Brown goes to the air. Going back is Mabon, leaping high and taking it in marvellous fashion with Rod Wishart. He has scored an incredible try and ties this fourth game up. Bartram from 18 metres out, he strikes it nicely. St George Illawarra win for the first time in their premiership line. Here's Nathan Blacklock down the sideline, chipping over the top of Joel Kane. Got a room surface bounce to win the game for the Dragons and book himself a New South Wales Blues origin jump.
Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to episode 219 of the Red V podcast, your undisputed home of everything St George Illawarra. And unfortunately, for the second week in succession, we're going to be talking about a comprehensive defeat for the St George Illawarra Dragons. They were pretty poor on Saturday night, apart from maybe a 9 or 10 minute little window in that Saturday afternoon affair at Cogra against the Cowboys, losing by 46 points to 24. Of course, we'll have the full rundown from that with myself, Jack Clifton, alongside Curtis Woodward here tonight on the podcast. We'll also preview the match against Manly. It doesn't get any easier for the Dragons, taking on a very good Manly Warringah side this Saturday night. Again, first game at Wollongong for the season as the side looks to turn around what's been a pretty uninspiring 1-2 start to the season. We'll also have a look at the latest Dragons news. We'll round up the lower grade results, a couple of good results for the St George SG Ball side and also the Jersey Fleek side that put up 50 points in their victory, and we'll answer your Fans Corner questions to round off the podcast here for episode 219. Well, Curtis Woodward, no doubt jubilant and jovial and all of those lovely J words after his West Tigers had a big win over the Sharks. And although we're not West Tigers fans here, I think we can always, especially after the Dragons have lost, bask in the glory of seeing little brother Cronulla lose. So that was always nice. But congratulations to your Tigers, Kurt. And looking forward to chatting some Dragons footy with you tonight on the podcast, mate. How are you travelling?
Good, Jack. Unfortunately, like you said, a tough weekend for the Dragons and more importantly for the Red V listeners. Appreciate it. A week's a long time in football, isn't it? So I'm more interested to see how West Tigers back up this week, which kind of mirrors much what we say on this podcast about how the Dragons go week to week. But yeah, tough weekend down at Cogra for the Dragons, and I've got plenty to say tonight. So, interesting one this week. I don't know how the Dragons can bounce back, but we'll see what happens. Like we said, a week's a long time in footy.
Yeah, it certainly is, but the Dragons fans are probably hoping that it was more than a week before we have to take on Manly, who of course went down to Parramatta last week and no doubt going to be looking to be fired up against the Dragons. We're also got to talk about that 17-man squad that has been named by Shane Flanagan. A few changes, a few fresh faces in there and players that missed last week's defeat, amongst a few little other things we want to mention in our Dragons news and updates this week on the Red V podcast. Well, firstly, let's look at that side that was named a couple of hours ago by head coach Shane Flanagan. A few changes in here, Kurt. We see the return of both Francis Molo and Jacob Little to the run-on side. Molo was serving a one-match suspension for a high tackle last week, so didn't play against his former club, the Cowboys. Jacob Little picked up a couple of head knocks in that loss against the Dolphins, so he was ruled out of last week as well. So that kind of solidifies the front row somewhat. And then you've got Tom Eisenhuth again, named to lock the scrum alongside Leilua, and Jaden Sewer, who did pick up a minor quad strain. And Ralph Physio did say that generally it takes 2 to 3 weeks for those to settle down. So, yeah, might be an idea just to keep some tabs on Sewer there to see if he does, in fact, line up for the Dragons. And then Jack de Belin dropped to the bench for the first time this year. And Hame Sele named there in jersey 16. We didn't see him at all during the preseason. We're hoping to see him in round 1, round 2, and then round 3. It's eventually been delayed week by week, but Hame Sele, their new off-season signing, the former Kingsgrove Colts rep and former St George Illawarra Dragon, does make his return to the Red V, and he'll get a chance to make his way off the bench in that match against Manly. The reserves bench, I should say, the extended bench, Christian Tuipulotu, Michael Molo in 19 and Viliame Fafita in 20 both dropped to the extended bench alongside Connor Malazan and also Matt Fierney. The rest of the side are pretty similar to what we've seen in recent weeks. Sloan, Lomax, Sully, Bird, Ravalawa, Flanagan and Hunt, the backs, followed by Frank Molo, Little, Laurie, Leilua, Sewer and Eisenhuth, and of course those players named on the bench. Jesse Marsh, Jack de Belin, Hame Sele and Raymond Fatala Mariner. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Kurt, but probably the strongest side the Dragons could have named. Corey Allen, the only name that is in the casualty ward for the Dragons. Removing Jack Bird might make it a bit stronger, but that's a conversation for another day. In terms of the forwards coming back with Frank Molo, Jacob Little, Tom Eisenhuth being preferred in the 13 and Jack de Belin dropped to the bench. What do you make of the overall changes here for the St George Illawarra Dragons and their big match against Manly on Saturday night?
Yeah, look, it's all pretty tame at this point of the season so far. Even with what the Dragons dished up last week, I mean, some of those players can thank themselves and thank their lucky stars that it is only round 4, because some of those blokes don't deserve to be playing in the NRL this week. But I guess Flanagan has to stick by them for at least a few more weeks because there's not really any other...
No, there's no depth. There's no depth, and I understand, seen a lot of comments this afternoon on social media of fans obviously being upset, and I think Jack Bird is extremely lucky. I don't think he has any right to be in the 17, but outside of him, these other players... I just don't know who you go to. I guess with the Bird situation, the reaction could be Lomax to centre, Tuipulotu onto a wing. But in terms of the forward pack, the Dragons just don't have any prop forwards. So yeah, even though I would have liked the youngster Viliame Fafita to get a few more minutes under his belt, and he still may get promoted to that interchange bench, I just don't think there's the options there currently, Kurt. So it's almost like fighting a losing battle with the cattle that they have at the moment, the Dragons.
Yeah, look, agreed. And look, this is a work in progress. We're going to hear that a lot this year, particularly from the coach and his leadership group, or whoever is unlucky enough to show up to some of these post-match press conferences. That there might be a few tough ones in the coming weeks. But like you said, it's kind of more reshuffling the pack to find. Someone that's going to stand up and lead them. Little's back, that's great. That's a bonus. But if they defend the way they did last week, it doesn't make a single bit of difference. That they should be embarrassed by what happened last week. So the players start this week, they've got a job to do.
What's the reasoning behind Jack de Belin coming off the bench? Is that poor performance? Shane Flanagan hasn't been impressed with Jack de Belin, or is it a strategy thing, Kurt, with Eisenhuth to start a guy that we know kind of can dominate through the middle, maybe not offensively, but more defensively, coming from that Melbourne system, and maybe de Belin coming on at that 20-25 minute mark to shore up the defence in the middle of the park? Or is it the fact that de Belin might be one of those prop forwards that's going to be coming off the bench, and that's going to be his position from now on?
Yeah, I guess from the outside looking in, it may have more to do with freeing up one of those edge second row spots and kind of going with Leilua and Sewer for the time being. And then you've probably got to find a spot for Eisenhuth, who's toiling away and trying his best. So in that sense, I guess if you move Eisenhuth to lock, then it frees up the chance to give Leilua and Sewer some chances to grow some more combinations, particularly Leilua, as he comes back to the club. And then I guess it's a pretty safe bet with DeBellin off the bench. He's going to play some minutes and can cover 8, 10, 13. And if he has to, and there's a shortage in the second row, he probably push him out a little bit wider if it gets really bad and they lose some players. But I think it might have more to do with Eisenhuth probably at this point needs to be in the starting side. And if you can do that from lock, then that means you can start Leilua and Jaden Sewer as well.
Yeah, because outside of DeBellin, you've obviously got Jesse Marshke, who's going to play that dummy half role. Hame Sele, who's a prop and a middle 40, has played a little bit of lock, but has most of his career has been played at prop. And then you've obviously got Raymond Fatalamana, who can play in the middle if need be, but I think it can be very damaging on an edge. So you would assume with that Sewer generally plays 80, so Leilua might interchange with Fatalamana as Leilua looks to get his legs from under him, and maybe DeBellin and Hame Sele kind of they're the two middle props that are going to have a bit of a rotation with both Frank Molo and Laurie. Neither really known for playing big minutes. Frank Molo probably more around the 40 mark. Laurie at times will play kind of 49, 51, 53 minutes, so maybe a few more minutes out of him, but definitely looking for some impact off the bench. And as I kind of mentioned a bit earlier, the extended bench, looks this way. Tuapolotu, Michael Molo, William Fafita, Connor Malazan, and Matt Fierney. So I dare say that the last two, Malazan and Fierney, probably going to be playing New South Wales Cup. Tuapolotu has been the 18th man a few times this year, and then maybe Molo or Fafita will play New South Wales Cup as well. I don't think there's going to be too much change to that interchange bench for the Dragons, but that is how they line up. It's going to be a big game again for the Dragons. At home at Wollongong, and we'll obviously touch on this a bit later into our match preview, but a place that Manly has not won at for a long, long time. So Dragons have had a lot of success against them, even when they have had better sides. So they'll be hoping that they can continue that run, that stretch of form against the Sea Eagles down at Wollongong. They'll look to continue that on Saturday night. Not too much else kind of making the rounds in terms of news about the St George Illawarra Dragons, but one thing that that did kind of pop up in our feed and our timeline just after we did the podcast last week, actually, last Wednesday, there was the Sydney Morning Herald, and Adrian Prezenko was reporting that the Dragons were looking to make a late play for the May brothers. Now, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but there's been plenty of mail coming through the last 48 hours that Taylor May has re-signed with the Panthers, and obviously, Tyrone May over in the UK. There was talk about perhaps the three brothers wanting to bundle together and play for one club, but it looks as if they're just kind of looking out for their own at the moment. No word on Terrell May. He's obviously still in contract negotiation with the Roosters. Can't see it happening, Kurt, but kudos to the Dragons for throwing the line out there and hoping they get a bit of a bite. It's a pretty simple decision at the moment. If you're at the Roosters, at a side that has a good chance of being a top four side, and certainly a side that's going to be playing semi-final football this year, or a side like the Dragons that a little like the proverbial Titanic in hitting an iceberg and looking like they're sinking to the depths of the ocean at the moment. The way things have been happening in the last few years, but you've got to be in it to win it. And I guess this is stuff that as we've mentioned on the podcast before, Kurt, stuff we haven't seen in recent years. So the fact that they're showing some ambition has to be applauded from a fan's perspective, I think.
Yeah, and look, I think the May brothers themselves kind of trying to push it out there in the media themselves that they'd all like to play together and come as a bit of a package, which may have raised some eyebrows for different clubs that they're currently playing at. I think that was a bit of a pipe dream from those guys. I don't see the Roosters letting him go. He's a very good young prop with a lot of X factor about him. I think the work they're putting into him now kind of suggests to me that, with a few older heads moving on, Hargraves is retiring or going to the Super League. Same thing, if you ask some people. But, I don't see him leaving the Roosters. But, look, it's nice that the Dragons are linked to him. If for nothing else, it means the Roosters have to pay a little bit more to keep him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I guess that's what the managers are paid to do. But yeah, he would be the prototype middle forward the Dragons need. A player in that ilk would certainly boost the Dragons' chances because, as we've seen in recent years and recent games, they really do struggle through the middle, the Dragons, that's for sure. No other news in terms of the Dragons. Been a really quiet couple of weeks with, not too much happening and obviously not too much talk about recruitment. It's more been about what's happening on the field for the Dragons. But of course, as you know, we'll be on top of all of that anytime any of that news breaks here on the Red V podcast. But instead, time for us to celebrate a few birthdays this week of former St George and Illawarra and St George Illawarra representatives. And the first person that is celebrating a birthday this week is former St George and Illawarra forward John Jansen. John is actually celebrating his birthday today. He has turned 69. He was originally from Corrimal, down on the south coast of New South Wales. He played in the 1977 Grand Final replay. He was a big body, a very pacey prop. He famously chased down. It was a length of the field chase where he chased down Cronulla Steve Rogers in a club match in the late 1970s. Is a memory that's kind of etched into a lot of Dragons fans' minds that were watching footy back in that era. But then, there was knee problems that ruined his 79 season when the Dragons, again, of course, lifted up the premiership. And then on his retirement, he did move into coaching with both St George and Illawarra in the lower grades, but 111 total first grade games and finished with 21 tries. My apologies. I said St George and Illawarra, just St George in his career for John Jansen, but did coach at Illawarra at a later stage in the lower grades. Played with St George between 1976 and 1983, but his last 3 seasons he only played 31 games because of that knee injury that limited him just to 1 game in 1979. But to be part of that 1977 Grand Final winning side that won that Grand Final replay, played Parramatta off the park and really bullied them as well in that 22 points to 0 victory, is something that's etched in Dragons folklore and in the history of rugby league as well. So a wonderful player, deserved to play more than 111 first grade games, and we wish a very happy birthday to John today, celebrating birthday number 69. The next person to celebrate a birthday this week is former St George 5'8" Tony Trudgett, who is going to be turning 69. He was a player that played a lot of football throughout his career. He played with St George between 1978 and 1983, and then played 21 games for Penrith in 1985. So played a total of 157 games for 28 tries, 23 of those with St George, and then of course the final 5 with Penrith in that 1985 season. A very underrated player, was a vital cog in that aforementioned 1979 premiership side. But again, a player that came from the country to St George. He was originally from Oberon. He then spent time with both Thirroul and Corrimal in the Illawarra competition, and then with working in town in England before joining the Dragons in 1978. So won the comp in 1979 with them. He then represented New South Wales in the same year against Great Britain and also against Queensland in a non-state of origin match at Leichhardt Oval in 1980, and then spent a bit of time in the country system and captain coaching a few different sides in the latter years, and of course was with Penrith in 1985 when a young coach by the name of Tim Sheens was looking to create a bit of a revival for them, which he obviously did. He was coaching Canberra when they won that premiership in 1991. But a wonderful player, and someone that is remembered fondly by a lot of fans, especially as we talk about many of those players from the 2010 era. Tony Trudgett from that 1979 premiership winning side, someone that is certainly well respected in rugby league circles. Well, we're continuing the theme of 1970s and 1980s former players for the Dragons, because later this week, on Saturday, in fact, Friday, there'll be a birthday for former winger and centre three-quarter for St George, Steve Gearan. So Steve will be turning 66 years of age. He was the Clive Churchill Medal winner in 1980, and I'll throw to Kurt in just a sec, but I can't really remember of too many players that were Clive Churchill Medal winners that played on the wing. It really was remarkable, because that Canterbury side that won the premiership in 1980 were a very good side, so for him to take that medal title home shows what an impact he did have on grand final day there. He scored that wonderful try. I'm sure you've seen it in highlight reels where, he leapt and plucked a Greg Brentnell kick on the full and was able to score in the dying minutes of the match. A game that Canterbury comfortably won by 18 points to 4. He scored a try that day, obviously, and also landed 6 goals to have 15 out of the 18 points awarded to him. Ironically enough, it was an Eastern Suburbs junior as well. Was growing up in the Newtown or Lewisham region, and then was graded with Canterbury. You might be wondering, well, what's this got to do with St George? He only spent a couple of years with the Dragons, but was the leading point scorer for them in 1983 and 1984. He was so prolific throughout his career, and he was a real sharpshooter back in the day where, if you were kicking at 50%, that was deemed acceptable, and he was someone that, regularly kicked between 60 and 70%. For St George in 1983, he scored 8 tries and kicked 80 goals for 192 points as the Dragons made a bit of an exciting run to the semi-finals in that 83 campaign, and then obviously a lot more consistent in 1984, where he played another 24 games, 7 tries, 81 goals, and 190 points as the Dragons made it within a game of the grand final. It didn't quite work out. He went across to Canterbury and played 13 games from in that year. They won the premiership and, ironically enough, beat St George in the decider, and then played 3 more games for Manly in 1986, but finished with 182 games, 78 tries, 567 goals for 1,390 points. And Kurt, these days, I guess it's kind of... you kind of roll with the punches when it comes to players being prolific point scorers. We've had Hasmore Masri, Cameron Smith, Andrew Johns, Jonathan Thurston, Nathan Cleary now, players that have come through, and it's just automatic when you hear that someone's passed 1,000 points. It doesn't mean anything. But back in this era where it wasn't professional and there was guys that were working, and sometimes if they got a job in the mines or they got a job as a sparky somewhere else, they would move out of Sydney, and it would mean that their career in the New South Wales Rugby League would be finished. For someone like him to have scored as many points as he did in only 182 games and kicking at a relatively high success rate for that time really it kind of speaks volumes about the player, Steve Gearin, and a guy that was able to lift up a couple of premierships when he was with those Canterbury sides of the 1980s as well.
Oh, look, obviously before our time, but that try, I mean, that's ridiculous to be able to do that then. That's on par with, it may not look, because we kind of get a little bit numb to the whole thing in modern day NRL and some of the things players can do. But back then, that was an incredible solo effort. And like you said, to win a Clive Churchill medal as a winger.
Is there any? Can you think of any other wingers off the top of your head that have won a Clive Churchill medal?
Oh,
I reckon he's probably got to be. If he's not the only one, then I reckon there's probably only 1 or 2 other people that have done it. Like I know that award kind of stretches back a fair way. Like I'm kind of thinking of Luke Rooney in 2003, but I don't think he won. He didn't win the Clive Churchill medal when Penrith beat the Roosters. I'm pretty sure it went to Preston Campbell or Scott Sattler or one of those guys. So it's a very obscure rugby league trivia that a question you could certainly throw out to the masses one day.
No, it's a good one. And look, like I was going to say, is like if you ask media from back that time, ask a Jack Gibson, like the coach, or a Rex Mossop what they thought of wingers back then.
Wingers are just people that hang around football players.
That's it. Exactly right. Exactly
and
right.
I'm pretty sure you would have used that line when you were playing with Campbelltown City back in the day, mate.
Oh, mate, no, that's blasphemy. Never would have played for Campbelltown City. Big rivals for the 1,000 teams I played for. Look, really, really good player. And just because you hear that name over and over, particularly at finals time, and you talk about great moments, I just assumed he played rep footy, but it looks like he never got a Guernsey for the Blues or anything like that. So I guess he can dine out and doesn't have to buy too many beers at reunions and corporate events and stuff like that with Bulldogs fans and I'm sure he's got fond memories with the Dragons as well. So happy birthday to Steve Gearin, and forever known one of the best tries from a winger you'll see in big stakes games. Just a really good player.
A couple of modern players celebrating birthdays on Saturday and Sunday this week. The first is former Illawarra Steelers representative Dean Scifoletti, who will be celebrating his 56th birthday. Another player that played very consistently over his career, a total of 184 first-grade games. He played 102 of those with Illawarra between 1989 and 1993. He was, as we've mentioned before in this podcast, was part of that Illawarra region and that Illawarra squad that really started to gain a bit of momentum with some of the young players that came through. Obviously, guys like Paul McGregor, Rod Wisher, John Cross, Neil Piccinelli, coming through with Dean Scifoletti at that time. 102 games for them. He played in the 1992 final series and also the 1992 pre-season to his cup that Illawarra won, and a bit of silverware in their cabinet. Went to South in 94 but had injuries and only played 6 games. Then the injury curse kind of continued for him. He played only 11 games for North Queensland over the next 2 years. He was part of the North Queensland squad in their inaugural season in 1995, but also played in 1996. 35 games for Adelaide in 97 and 98 before, of course, Adelaide were expelled from the NRL at the end of the 1998 season, and then played 30 games for a pretty good Parramatta side around that era. Obviously didn't win any premierships, but played in a preliminary final in 99 and also represented them in a final series in 2000. A pretty handy, underrated rake in his time, Kurt. I feel like with some of these guys, with the time period they played and the fact that Super League was around, they didn't know that going to North Queensland or going to Adelaide or the Western Reds or whatever don't want to say tarnish their career, but I feel like it just takes a little bit away from the player that they were. They kind of get forgotten a little bit, but I think Dean Scifoletti was a very good player in his own right, and I think Parramatta kind of found that at the back end of his career. In his last couple of seasons, he was a very valuable player in a side that had some young talent, and under Brian Smith were able to find a fair bit of success, having kind of been in the wilderness for so long throughout the late 80s into effectively most of the 1990s before Brian Smith came.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I agree, but there's also another way to look at it. I'm looking at his record here. I mean, he only debuted in 89 at the Steelers, and he was their skipper in 92. And then the following year in 93, after the Steelers went through to that prelim against the Dragons, apparently announced that he was signing for the Cowboys for their first season in 95.
And they stripped the captaincy off him and dropped him to reserve grade.
Yeah, so look, it's interesting how his career went. Like it kind of spiraled from a few clubs, here and there. But the other way to look at it too is that there were 20 teams in 1995. By 97, there were 22 because there was 12 in ARL and 10 in Super League. That's a lot of players that clubs had to sign up to fill up their squads. And Scifoletti would have played first grade through that period, whether there was Super League or not. But I kind of look at it another way, where players made more money through that period than they ever would have imagined. Their salaries could spike like that. So it's like Scifoletti, like I said, he kind of bounced around a bit. North Queensland, Adelaide, had to obviously spend a year at South as well before he retired at Parramatta. But a lot of these guys would not have ever got the chance to play first grade because the game was spread so thin. So not specifically Scifoletti, but just talking generally about other players for that period. And guys prolonged their careers as well for a lot longer than they did. But, yeah, I remember him at Parramatta right at the end of his career and thought he was a great addition to Parramatta and kind of helped Brian Smith in a way, kind of like the Roosters did with Phil Gould. They had a lot of experienced players come through the ranks there before they finally found that premiership team and that success through the early 2000s under Ricky Stewart. He just missed out on that with Brian Smith when the Eels went mad in 2001. So,
yeah,
very good, underrated player and a bit of controversy to his career as well.
Yeah, that's right. And our last birthday is former St George Illawarra representative Aaron Gorrell, who will be celebrating a birthday on Sunday, turning 43, one of the more recent players of this St George Illawarra era. Only played 60 first-grade games. He was a player that really toiled hard in reserve grade when he and waited for his opportunities, but he got some big opportunities in 2005 and 2006 with the Dragons. Then after that, played a couple of seasons over in France with Catalans, played 24 games over the 2007 and 2008 campaigns for them, and now I know he is coaching. He is doing some really good things. I know he's down with Queanbeyan most recently, but I believe he's moved on to a few other ventures. There, and someone that still loves his footy, still loves the Dragons. Goal kicking hooker as well, probably most well known for that sideline conversion against Brisbane. I think it might have been in 2006 when Brett Morris scored in the corner with a few minutes to go. Gorrell, who I don't think had taken a kick all afternoon or all evening, landed one from the touchline to get the Dragons home, 18 points to 16, but had a career year for the Dragons in that 2006 season. Played 26 games, 5 tries and 55 goals for 130 points. And, gee, had to be good to be in that Dragon side of 06 with obviously guys like Dean Young and Sean Timmins, Gaznia Cooper, the like there, including some big boppers like Jason Riles and Luke Bailey as well. So a very happy birthday to Aaron, and hope he's doing well wherever he is these days celebrating birthday number 43. Well, before we finish off our Dragons news and updates section, we do need to jump in and take a look at the Who Am I for this week on the Red V podcast. Now, the last few weeks, we've kind of made it difficult for some of you guys, and I feel like tonight's one is kind of a little bit intermediate. You probably need a little bit of 1990s rugby league knowledge to potentially get this particular individual. But we do have a few clues that we're going to be giving out to you to try and help you along. But the player we're talking about is a former outside back that played 3 seasons for the St George Dragons in 1995, 1996 and 1997. He played 1 game for St George in 95, 10 games for St George in 1996 where he scored 2 tries, and then 17 games for St George in that split competition that Kurt was just talking about. He played 17 games in 97 and scored 2 tries. Then went off and played 3 seasons at North Queensland. He scored 9 tries in just 12 games in 99 and then played 15 games in 2000 and 3 in 2001 for a total of 58 first-grade games. He also played 22 first-grade games for St Helens in 1998, so he kind of broke up those two campaigns with St George and North Queensland. Played 22 games for St Helens in 1998. Not too many more clues I can give apart from that because I don't want to give it away. In 2001 he was spent most of his season with the Cowboys Feeder Club playing a fair bit of Queensland Cup there, but a guy that could play fullback, played on the wing, played in the centres, was around the Dragons in that mid-90s period where they had a little bit of success. Anyone that's kind of coming to mind for you, Kurt? It's a bit tricky, this one, I think.
I'm just trying to think of the 2000. Okay, this makes me sound like a bit of a nerd, but trying to think of the 2000 Cowboys footy card set. That I was just looking at the other day. I don't know if you got a card or not. Is he a Kiwi?
No, he's not. So born 4th of July 1974 in Australia, billed as 98 kilos and 186 centimetres and played centre, wing and fullback.
Oh, I'll leave it till the end, but I'm sure I'm just having a bit of a mind blank there. But we'll leave it up to the Red V listeners as well.
Yep, so 58 first-grade games with St George and North Queensland for 16 tries, and there was 28 of those with the Dragons, including 17 in that 1997 season. So if you're a fan around that era, maybe try and think of some of the players that were running around for the Red V during that 1997 campaign. Well, time for us to take our first break here on episode 219 of the Red V podcast, folks, and then on the other side of this break, we're going to dissect all the latest after the Dragons' disappointing 46 points to 24 loss against the North Queensland Cowboys. We'll talk about that positive start and how it all went so horribly wrong from the Dragons. We'll talk about the poor performances, especially defensively, of both Jack Bird and Tyrell Sloan. And we'll talk about why is it so concerning that the Dragons get so bent out of shape when a few things go against their way. Lots to talk about in our next update here on the Dragons, the match preview against the match review against the North Queensland Cowboys. That's coming up next here on the Red V podcast.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses, so don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Well, it was a positive start that all went to muck midway through that first half for the St George Illawarra Dragons, losing 46 points to 24 against the North Queensland Cowboys. It all started so well, didn't it, Kurt? I guess apart from the first try to North Queensland, but then three very quick tries that could have potentially been four if Raymond Fatala-Mariner hadn't dropped his lollies over the shop floor. But gee, the game seemed to turn very, very quickly for all the positives that the Dragons showed in attack. Defensively, I don't know if I have the vocabulary to describe some of those defensive decisions. It was a bitterly disappointing evening for a lot of Dragons fans, whether you were watching live at the game or you're watching on the TV, Kurt.
I'm struggling to try to put this into words. I think I tweeted the other day, there was a couple of 12-point turnarounds and just the way that the lack of resolve when something kind of went against them. Look, it was atrocious. I couldn't even call it Sydney Shield level, some of the efforts and those defensive reads. I thought the Cowboys from the opening whistle were probably playing within themselves a bit. And the Dragons did score some points, and I went, oh, okay, all right, the Cowboys might be a bit off here, and the Dragons might run up a score. Like we said, some bomb tries for the Dragons, and it kind of kicked the Cowboys up the arse a bit. And you could see the difference in intent from the Cowboys as the match went on. The Dragons kind of just let them do whatever they wanted to do. I mean, that Chad Townsend try, that's a halfback. That's a 5'10", 80-kilo ringing wet halfback rolling through your middle forwards and scoring like that. He carried three Dragons over with him.
That was awful.
They made him look like Gordon Tallis, and they just weren't willing to apply themselves. It's as simple as that. They looked pretty good with the footy, but they were happy enough with the footy and throwing it around, but just looked so hopelessly disinterested when they had to roll the sleeves up and get stuck into the defensive side of it. It's almost, I don't know how to explain it. That's round three football.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go too hard at them because it is a long season and they might bounce back this week. They have to. But the lack of resolve when literally within 60 seconds, some of these, something would go wrong and some of it was positive wrongs, if you want to call it that. Mariner gets through into the in goal, loses the ball, little stuff like that. You're on top. And the Cowboys just, it was like a slingshot up and down the field. Dragons would stuff up and they just drop their heads and look, just really, 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 really bad. Really bad. I don't want to kick them too much because they should be hurting. Surely they'd be fired up to play this weekend. Again, backing up in front of their fans, but that's not NRL standard. That's nowhere near NRL standard. Nowhere near it.
And the way it so quickly turned as well, like I kind of lost count, but every time that North Queensland came into the Dragons' half, it looked inevitable. It looked inevitable that they were going to score. Like the first try they score, they don't have a numbers advantage. They just, Birdie gets caught out of position a little bit, and they get on the outside of him, and Drinkwater throws a cutout pass to Taulagi, and Lomax obviously can't keep pace with him, and he scores. But gee, I think you look back at all the tries. I think seven of the tries came on the left-hand side of the field. So I think it's quite obvious that, and we'll talk about this next in our match preview against Manly. I think teams are really starting to target that left edge of the Dragons because it's slow, it's defensively very, very poor, and it's going to cause all sorts of headaches for the club moving forward. I guess from your point of view, from an analytical point of view, Kurt, what did you see out of the Dragons defensively? Because it's one thing to kind of concede 46 points and be like, oh, we're poor, or we kind of got dominated through the middle, which they did. Reece Robson had an absolute day, which he would have loved against his former club, the club that was so smart that thought they didn't need him and were happy to move him on and let the Cowboys take him. He ran amok in the ruck. But elsewhere, kind of from when you put your analytical rugby league hat on, what are you seeing out of the Dragons defensively? Is it they're just too slow? Do they just not have the cattle to compete with some of these other forward packs? What are you seeing out of them at the moment, Kurt?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know how analytical I can be. It seems pretty obvious that when it's time to do the hard yakka and get stuck in with the bloke next to you and push back in your defensive line, and teams in round 3 should not be running through gaps that the Cowboys were running through on Saturday. And it's application, it's mental toughness that they don't have. I honestly, for round 3, that looked like a side that had already lost the season. It was the last game of the year. They were already planning their trip to Bali or Hawaii or wherever you go these days, and they just weren't interested in defending. There was nothing there. It was weak. Look, like I said, I don't want to kick him too much because I've been pretty patient with him and trying to find middle ground on this podcast and try to find positives in what they've been doing. But to fall away so quickly when things haven't gone their way from basically kick-off in round 2 up until full-time round 3 so far this year, that's one thing. But to be in games and to lead the Cowboys the way they were, to get smashed like that, and the way they made it so easy for the Cowboys, it almost looked to me like it was, when back in the day when you're a kid and you have to play against the big, bad, best team in the comp, and you're just not there. You're just not in it. And you prefer to look at each other and kind of, shrug your shoulders and raise your arms and say, well, what happened there, boys? But no one's looking within themselves, and there's no trust. It's not even trust with their own teammates. I don't think they trust themselves. It was that bad. I don't know where they go from here. And look, the depth is an issue. So the next question is, how long can Shane Flanagan, the formation of the team, if you will, to take a football term or a soccer term, that the players in the position they are, that they don't look like they can hold out for, they can't put 80 minutes together the way they're playing and the squad and the team the way it's picked at the moment. I just don't see this lasting much longer. Flanagan's the coach. He's going to be the coach, but he needs to, he keeps talking about, it's about next year and the year after. Well, how much pain do you want to go through this year? How much confidence do you want to lose? How, are you going to be proactive and move some of these pieces? Because look, I wish I could come up with some analytical stuff and break it down for you, but it's impossible to break that down analytically because that's how poor defensively they were. It was just Blind Freddie could see that they just weren't committed. They did not want to be out there defensively. And if the Cowboys were on from the first minute and the Dragons played like that and got worse and worse and worse, that could have been 60 or 70 if the Cowboys really wanted to.
Definitely.
They could have, which is really alarming this early in the year. It's a very serious red alert for some of these outside backs as well. I know you wanted to talk about Bird and particularly Sloan as well. I can't defend Sloan this week. It's just not happening at the moment for this combination of players. But where do they go? Who do they bring in? Are they any better dropping into these blokes?
Well, there's no one there. That's what we.
Where do you put him?
What I was saying before. There's no one there. Like, you could throw in a Villiamo for Fafita, but you can also make the argument that you don't want to crush the spirit of these young players too early, too soon. You've got the Couchmans as well. I would like to see them considered at some stage, but Flanagan seems to think that they played a bit too much first grade last year, and maybe he wants them to spend half a season, 3/4 of a season, maybe even a full season in reserve grade. I know they didn't show an awful lot in the preseason games, but I think they at least are going to be putting effort in over some of these other players that. Yeah, I'm not going to say they've checked out, but some of these players that might just not have that fire burning in them as a first grader as much anymore. But like, I do want to talk about Bird and Sloan, but I'm just going to put a pin in that for a moment, Kurt, because there was some good comments that Shane Flanagan made, also interesting comments at his presser at Cogra on Saturday afternoon. This is what he had to say in terms of the lack of resilience of where this club is at the moment.
Yeah, I think we're better than that. I think we just need to show some resilience defensively. We showed today that we can score points, and we've got some players in there that can play with the football, but we just need to be better defensively. It is a new team, some new staff, new coaches, and all that. It's going to take some time, but I'd like to think that we can be better than we showed defensively today. Just some soft tries there. There's 3 or 4 on last tackle that we could have handled better. Maybe at some points the Cowboys competed a little bit harder than us.
Yeah, very concerning. I think that last comment where he talks about the Cowboys competing harder than them, the Dragons' lack of resilience is a huge concern. It's something that has been ingrained in the club for a long time. It's almost like it's under 12 stuff where you're seeing young kids dropping their heads when they concede a couple of tries. But for grown men, professional athletes to be fading so badly and so quickly, I think is hugely concerning for the club kind of moving forward, Kurt. I'm bemused about how they get bent out of shape so easily and so quickly as well. And I think that's the challenge for Flanagan. And I'll kind of talk about this a little bit later in our match review here, in the fact that I think this year I don't want to say this year is going to be a write-off, because I think that lacks the respect that Shane Flanagan deserves as a head coach. But I think we kind of need to sit and reevaluate where the Dragons are, because I think the way things are going, and defensively the way the club has performed over the last fortnight, shows that I think there's an enormous amount of work to do, and just getting 5 or 6 wins and just avoiding the spoon is going to be a challenge, let alone talking about 9 or 10 wins like I was saying earlier in the season. I think there's a lot of work and a lot of, well, he's spoken about the bodies being reshaped, but what about the minds being reshaped? I think that's the more pressing issue at the Dragons at the moment, Kurt.
Yeah, and I was just thinking then, look, maybe some of these guys have been at the club too long. Maybe they are too far along, and just it's so ingrained in the team that they don't know how to get out of situations, even when they're winning. They were up by a couple of tries against the Cowboys.
Up by 14, yeah.
Yeah, and it could have been more. It could have been a few more tries than that. The way it's not even fading, because it's like, I can imagine what it's like for a Dragons fan trying to watch them. It's almost like getting punched in the face every 5 minutes for 80 minutes. And just going, what is happening? And look, I don't want to name names, but there's been a lot of guys there that have been at the club a long time now. But but it happens consistently over and over. Yes, round one might have been an outlier. The Titans have proven they've been pretty poor so far to start the year. But with the Dragons, it just gets worse and worse as the games go on. I think the players know it's happening too. They know in real time that they don't have, and I'll use the word that Flanagan used, the resilience to get themselves out of it. We can see it happening. And there's almost like an acceptance on the field that, okay, plan one didn't work, we're stuffed. And then they sit there and say, well, we chucked the footy around, what else are we meant to do? It's almost like when you watch them individually, and I've touched on this before, they're almost looking at each other and nobody is taking any blame on field.
Well, there's no leadership either. Like when your club captain was running amok last year and having a sook about how he has to stay, when he's the one that's then telling Zach Lomax about what he needs to do for the club and this and that and whatever, and they've got some questions about that, so I won't kind of steal all the glory. Like, I'm not surprised that the players are playing like this. I just think there's zero leadership out there. There's no one that when the ship starts sinking, there's no one that's willing to stand guard and try and resurrect things. Everyone just wants to jump off and wants to take the easy option out, and it's been that way for a long time, Kurt.
Well, put it this way: you just used an analogy about the ship sinking, and Ben Hunt, his comments. I think there's a fan corner question coming up about this too, but he said, "Oh well, look, it doesn't." You know, he said something off the cuff in the presser about, well, they didn't listen to anything I had to say. Why would you? If you're a player at that club and you're as down in the dumps as you are, why are you going to take any advice from your captain, your skipper, who jumped off the ship last year, swam back to the boat and got back on it?
Yep.
He's already so if the Dragons were winning and Ben Hunt was still playing good footy, that's one thing. But was Ben Hunt any better than any other Dragons on the field on the weekend, or has he been streets ahead of everyone else so far this year? No way. So why would they start listening to him now? They're getting smashed left, right, and centre, and he's at the press conference almost kind of fobbing it off and saying, "Well, you know, I had my say and they didn't listen to me."
Yeah,
I think it's saying a lot more about how the players are now reacting to Ben Hunt. Rather than the other way around. If you're reading the room on that one, there's some smoke there. And look, that's the easy way out for some of these veterans and Ben Hunt and the rest of them is that they keep losing. They can take their pay and leave the club and find another team. So are these guys emotionally invested in the turnaround, or is Flanagan kind of sitting there saying, I am going to move some of these blokes on, but I can't do it yet, so what else can I do?
Yeah.
It's a really tough spot, and if it gets worse and they get flogged again on the weekend, what's Ben Hunt going to say this weekend at the press conference?
Yeah. And I think it's a harder task. Flanagan's come out before and said that he doesn't think the Dragons are in a bad position as Cronulla were. And I'm just kind of looking through some of the results from 2011 in his first full year at the Sharks. And I think the Sharks were in a much better position than us. It's not like we have this amazing management team that is lifting the club up and is making moves and making changes like the Cronulla board was eventually able to do after a few years of cleaning out the deadwood. So, yeah, like I think the Dragons are in a much worse position. I think the Sharks, when Flanagan took over at the end of 2010, had a much better forward pack. Sure, their backs weren't great, but defensively they were a strong unit because they had some big bodies and they were willing to grind out results. The Dragons still don't have an identity. They've obviously got Shane Flanagan and he's trying to create an identity for them, but defensively we look as worse as ever. We look worse than last year, and that's no slight on Shane Flanagan. That's not his fault. He's come in here and he has inherited an absolutely god-awful roster of players that don't care and are happy to collect a paycheck and just cash out and just mentally check out, and not to mention all of the other issues off the field, and the loser mentality that this club has had for such a long time. So I think this whole rebuild, which Shane Flanagan hasn't said, and I'm unsure why he hasn't called it a rebuild, because I would think if anything, if you mention that it's a rebuild, it certainly gives you a bit more time to build a squad and build the right results coming through. But regardless, I think this rebuild is going to take a lot longer for Shane Flanagan. Obviously, he needs to get better players in. And I think it's evident what we saw on the weekend. Tyrell Sloan is he's not a first-grade fullback. I don't care how many times he backs up. I don't care how many tries he scores or how great he looks when he's in open space. He can score 35 tries this year, but if he's letting in 50 or 55, then he has failed as his role as an NRL fullback. And we saw the basic fundamentals. If you just watch the first half, Kurt, he fails to ground a ball, one of the easiest tasks and the task that every fullback in the comp should be capable of doing. He couldn't do that, which led directly to Griffin Neame scoring under the posts. That I think got it back to 18-10 perhaps, I think it might have made it 18-16. And then North Queensland take the lead when I think it might have been Townsend kicks to the corner. Ravalawa sets up a block for Sloan, and Sloan barely gets his feet off the ground and is out-jumped, and the ball's tapped back, and Drinkwater runs around and scores. So that's 2 tries directly related to him. And then, well, if you're playing along at home, well, Jack Bird, that you could probably count 5 or 6 tries that came down his side for rushing up, poor defensive reads, missed tackles. He was just given a dead set bath by Valentine Holmes. His defensive performance was laughable. So it's hard enough when you've got a forward pack that's being bullied every week, Kurt, and you've got guys that aren't up to standard. But when you've got 2 guys in your back line that just they're shooting you in each foot, they're shooting you in, they're kneecapping you, you just can't compete. It's not 1970s, 1980s rugby league anymore where the game wasn't and that's not a slight at players that play back then, but we're not in an era where it's not professional and you can carry 2 or 3 players. You just can't do that in the modern game, because with all the video work, all of the research and analysis that gets done, it's just going to get pulled apart. And I really fear for the Dragons on Saturday night, because I think that could be an absolute bloodbath with Trebojevic, Garrick, Cherry Evans, Brooks, all of those guys running at the likes of Bird and Lomax, and some of those other guys that have struggled defensively. I just think there's so many issues, and it's going to take a long time for it to be fixed and rectified. Kurt, and I just think this year is just going to be a year where we're just going to have to try and get through each week as positively as we can, because I think there's going to be a fair few losses kind of next to the name of the Dragons for 2024, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and look, again, I agree. It's a rebuild, right? I understand all that. But the biggest issue for me right now with the Dragons after just 3 games of the new season is that they're not putting in. Even if their squad is not up to par with the top 8 teams and the teams above them on the table, they're not applying themselves. There isn't the effort that the other teams are putting in.
And you can't train that, Kurt. You can't train that. Players, and those guys just need to be dropped. Like Flanagan needs to show some balls if that's the case, and drop them. Regardless of how much they're getting paid.
Yeah, and look, this may sound a little bit silly to some, but I always think that you compare a team and you want them. You want to shoot for the stars. You want to have really, really strong KPIs. And if you don't reach the KPIs, you're probably still doing better than what you did before if you're just shooting for low-hanging fruit. So I'd ask you a question, Jack. How many guys from this Dragons starting 13 that's been picked this weekend, how many of them are a walk-up start to walk into one of the current top 4 teams in the NRL? Off the top of your head, how many of them would get a start in a top 4 team right now?
Well, the only 2 I can think of is Lomax and Hunt, probably.
Yeah, and I'd even question that in the sense that on form and the way they're playing, I don't think anyone wants to touch these guys with a 10-foot pole. From what I understand, and I just got a text message on NRL 360, they're reporting that Lomax is now going to meet with the Dragons for a second time, maybe. So look, there's definitely moving parts here, but at the end of the day, black and white, if the Dragons were having a dig, they're not losing the way they would on the weekend. They wouldn't have lost the way they did in round 2, and at least you've got something for the Dragons fans to cheer about and be hopeful about. 3 weeks into the new season, and we're talking about an NRL side that hasn't had a dig or wanted to play 160 minutes of footy.
Yeah,
that's the most worrying thing for me. What's doing?
I can't answer it. Yeah, because the effort levels have been really poor, and I don't know how Flanagan can get that out of them. I think this week certainly a boost, as we spoke about at the top of the podcast. I think like Frank Molo, Little, Jaden Sewer, and James Ellie all coming in, I think, strengthens that. And maybe it won't be as bad as I've been predicting, but fans are certainly not confident about it. And I understand that it's a long season and we're only 3 weeks in, and in 10 weeks' time by round 13, that the Dragons' defence might be a lot better. They might only be conceding 21 or 22 points on average, and the combinations may improve, and the style of football that Flanagan wants to play, it's obviously going to take time for them to get used to that, and Dean Young as defensive coach to get things right. But they at least deserve some accountability. Like, it's professional sports, it's professional rugby league. You can't just go out there and just be like, oh, well, like, we're rebuilding, so it doesn't matter, like, if the Cowboys almost put 50 on us at home, and it doesn't matter if Manly beat us, like, 52-10 next week. Like, it's professional. They need to have pride in the jumper and the jersey, and we're 3 weeks in. Flanagan said this was a semi-final side. He said he believed this side could qualify for the semi-finals. So, at the moment, that kind of seems way off the mark. So, things have to change, and just in the effort category, like, if the Dragons were, this is what I meant to say earlier, like, if the Dragons were losing, like, 24-14 or 22-16, and you could just see that, like, they were just really putting in, and they were just sweat, blood and tears being put into absolutely everything, and they were losing because they lacked finesse or they lacked quality in that final third, then you kind of cop that. I think a lot of Dragons fans, even though we're fed up with losing, I think would be realistic about where the club is at the point that you're happy to, maybe not happy to see losses, but at least see some determination. But, gee, when you look at that Townsend try, when you look at Sloan barely contesting a kick, being out of position for 40-20s, forwards with hands on their hips after one set, like, it just makes you think, well, this side is further away from a premiership than probably there ever been. And the last thing that fan base wants is players in a team that aren't kind of putting in. So, like, I don't know what the answer is. I really hope we see a change in attitude this weekend against Manly, and certainly over the course of the season. It's like I don't know where they go from here, but look, I didn't want to finish the chat without kind of talking about the attack, because it was probably one of the few bright spots. There wasn't really too many positive to speak about in that game, but I quite like, and maybe some of this was to do with the way that North Queensland kind of approached the match, and maybe they were a little bit asleep in the first 20 minutes and they kicked into gear. But I was quite impressed with the attack, and I liked the shape of what the Dragons were doing, and obviously the efforts of Zach Lomax to get a couple of tries as well. Did you have any kind of thoughts or takeaways on what you saw out of the Dragons attack, at least in that first 20 minutes?
Yeah, they looked pretty good at different stages. They got the Cowboys down one side several times, and I think I said on X or Twitter that was Dearden, Holmes and Tuilagi. So that's, I think, all played for Queensland or played for Australia, all rep players. There were signs of life, and the crowd. This is what I loved about it. The Dragons got the crowd into it.
They did, yeah.
And that's what the Dragons had to do. They had to keep the crowd in the game for as long as they could, but just play by play, it all got so deflating, and the crowd was just silent by the end of it. It was like a lead balloon. And I've said this before about the Dragons, it's death by 1,000 cuts. And yet, look, I did think early on that some of the tries the Dragons scored looked very, very simple. Like, we were looking at two top 8 teams going at it, and the Dragons were up and the Cowboys were a little bit off. But it just, everyone knows what happened after that. And I did like some of the attack. It does look very organised, and I think that's because you've actually got some front ball runners now that are offering threats to the defensive line, which, if nothing else, even if they're just running a decoy, that changes the shape of the defensive side and actually gives you half a second, because they kind of sit back on their heels a little bit more because they're not so sure where the ball's going. So there were a couple of good signs there, but look, they could score 40 points this weekend, but if they don't show up ready to play and like I said before, roll the sleeves up defensively, that they might concede 60. We could see 60-40 on the weekend, Jack.
Yeah, well,
probably not. But
yeah, that's like, I would much prefer they were just a better defensive team rather than being attacking. It's obviously nice to see them score a few points, but you know in the back of your mind that it's never going to be enough.
It's very easy for a team to run around with the footy under their arm. But the game's won on defence, and unfortunately for the Dragons right now, I don't want to bring it back to that. But it doesn't matter what they do with the ball right now. It's turning up for your mate or showing some signs of life for your fans. It's like the game itself on the weekend. It's a bit deflating that we have to keep talking about this on this podcast, but I think the fans deserve better. It's week 3. I mean, how many weeks of the season have we got left?
Another 24, not that I'm counting, Kurt.
Well, we'll see what happens this week, eh?
Yeah, that's all we've got to rely on at the moment. But yeah, like I guess to finish, I think it probably goes against what I've said for the last 15 minutes, but I guess we kind of need to be realistic about where this club is at the moment and combinations and coaching styles and all of that kind of stuff. Flanagan's just kind of getting his feet wet now at the Dragons. He's only been here for a few months, so it's going to take time and hopefully we see some improvement. I don't think, we wouldn't care less. We won't be talking about the Cowboys 46-24 kind of mauling in 15 weeks' time or at the end of the season if the Dragons end up churning out 10 or 12 wins and improve their defence and start playing some good football and maybe that's what we see out of them, especially with a few players coming back. So, I guess, it's a lesson to me as well, folks, that need to be a bit more circumspect about where the club is at the moment. We're going to take a break, give myself and Kurt a little bit of a breather before we jump into the match preview. The Dragons doing battle with Manly down at Wollongong on Saturday night. Welcome back to episode 219 of the Red V podcast. Jack Clifton and Curtis Woodward here with you. Well, time to preview the round 4 match for the St. George Illawarra Dragons. They jump back into it again at home. First home game at Wollongong this season for the Dragons as they take on the Manly Seagulls. Manly having gone through and won 2 out of their first 3. Don't have a great track record down at Wollongong, but gee, the way they've been playing and attacking, it does seem like big danger signs for the Dragons, Kurt, especially with what we've just spoken about defensively. I was going to say, how do the Dragons win this game? But I think a more apt question would be, how do the Dragons keep the Seagulls under 50 points in this game, especially with the threats that they have all over the field?
Good question. I think, look, it all starts in the middle. It starts through the middle third. I don't think they can win, but if you allow them to, I don't think the Dragons can stop Manly. I'll put it that way. I don't think they have the ability or the mental toughness right now. But if you allow them to gun through that middle third, there's so many options for them at the moment. Their big boppers are running rampant. They've got very, very, very dangerous edge second rowers. Obviously, you've got Tom Turbo. But then after all that, then Cherry Evans and Brooks on different sides of the field can release their outside backs as well. The Dragons need to desperately find a way to lock up that middle. Otherwise, Manly's going to have a field day. And look, I'm not looking at the first 20 minutes. I'm looking at the 10 minutes before halftime and potentially the 50th minute to about the 60th minute. They're the down periods for the Dragons where they just go to pieces. And there's nothing there right now. There's no substance behind what they're doing as a unit. And Manly, look, theoretically they probably should have won against Para on the weekend. And look, technically I agree that should have been a penalty. But look, at the end of the day, Manly's on fire. And then you look at the forward pack. You look at the forward pack for the Dragons, and it comes back to depth and the lack of X factor the Dragons currently have. When you look at Manly, they've got it across the park. So it's a real tough one this weekend for the Dragons. But I don't want to talk. I don't want to defend the Dragons players because what they've turned up the last 2 weeks, it's indefensible. So it's on the players this weekend to show up and have a dig and not just compete for different sections of the game, but do it over an 80-minute period where you at least keep Manly honest. Keep them honest and get through the game. So at least you can walk off, go to the post-match function, whatever they do these days, and look the Red V members in the face and say, you know what, we had a dig today. We have to work off that. Start from scratch again. If they play like they did last week, it's going to get very, very, very ugly for the Dragons.
A return for Hame Sele this week, probably one of the more damaging forwards the Dragons have at their disposal. What do you think we're going to see out of him this week, and do you think that kind of helps shore up the middle for a little bit for the 20 or 30 minutes that he's going to be on off the bench? I can't imagine he'll play big minutes because it is his first game of the season, no preseason fixtures or anything. But what are you hoping to see out of Hame Sele this week?
No, I just want to say quickly, I feel a bit bad that the more we go into this and the more questions you ask about the Dragons, I feel like you're getting a little bit sadder every time.
Yeah, I am, mate. I am, but it's just that's just the life as a Dragons.
Yeah,
mate.
No, that's all right, mate. Chin up, buddy. Look, Paul Hame Sele, his teammates have a lot to answer for because this poor bloke has been fighting, what is it, a hammy?
Yeah.
He's been fighting a hammy injury through off-season. He's obviously, if I was in his shoes, I'd be getting, sweating a little bit and getting a little bit anxious and paranoid that I need to get back on the field and help these guys out. I just want to see him get through the minutes he's expected to play and get him through the game, get him off the field, put him in cotton wool and go again next week. But like I was saying, it says a lot about where this team is already after 3 games that he's one of the talking points on your run sheet, Jack, is that if the Dragons were having a go, Hame Sele probably doesn't get a spot on your run sheet this week. We should be talking about 10 other things, but we're talking about this poor bloke back from injury. He just wants to get through his first game. But we're already talking about Sele, potentially making a difference off the bench. I think some of his teammates, particularly the middle forwards this weekend, need to help him by doing a little bit more than what they did last week. What do you think? What are you expecting from Sele this week?
Oh, I'm expecting a solid performance. So, I'm not expecting too much because it's his first game back. But I think he is one of the few Dragons forwards that has the ability to dent the line, and wreak a bit of havoc. And I think he's a good defensive player. I think he's strong through the middle. I know South are kind of going through the ring at the moment, but in the last couple of years, you don't make the South starting side unless you're a quality forward with some of the forwards they had at their disposal. So I think he's a really good signing, and I think he's someone that can shore up the middle, but I think it's unfair to expect that one player is going to be able to have that burden on their shoulders. But I think what I do like is the forward rotation a bit more. It means less minutes out of Molo and Laurie, means they stay fresher. And I think any time that you can bring on a quality player when one of those guys goes off, I think is a good thing for the Dragons. So I think with the players that have come back in, I don't think it'll be as much the cricket score as I was kind of first suggesting. I think it shores up the defence a little bit, but like we said in the previous segment, Kurt, I think there needs to be a real to borrow a term from your mate John Cena, attitude adjustment with the Dragons. Nice. and the way that they kind of look at things, especially defensively, because obviously their attitude's great when it comes to being an offensive side and getting inside the opposition 20, but in terms of defending their own line, it's been absolutely deplorable. So that's what I'm probably hoping to see out of him, and from the other forwards as well. I think the next question on my run sheet was anything else you want to see more of? I want to see more out of the whole pack for the Dragons, because I think they're the ones that need to try and lay a platform, and I think far too often they've been bailed out by Lomax running 23 or 24 times a game and Sully running for 150 metres. They need to do the hard yards, do the dirty work through the middle, and just be aggressive. Just try and really monster this Sea Eagles pack and give yourself a challenge of let's do this for 80 minutes and see where it gets us, and let's not, even if we fall 16 or 18 behind, let's not just give up because we think we're not going to win the game. Let's just try and stick with them for the full 80 minutes. That's kind of what I want to see. I don't know if there's any players that you identify identifying the 17 for the Dragons that you think can cause Manly some problems, Kurt, or someone you want to stand up? But I want to see the entire forward pack show a little bit more gumption and a bit more pride and physicality than what we've seen in the last 2 weeks against the Dolphins and the Cowboys.
I think it goes deeper than the forward pack, but all games start with the forward pack. I need to see all of them dig in. And there's still little things that maybe Flanagan is trying to uncoach out of them. Little things rubble hour against the Dolphins where, the kick goes across and he, instead of going forward and attacking the ball, he goes backwards, plants his feet, and Osako just falls over the top and scores the try. Little things like that, just these little things that the Dragons have been doing year on year. The score's going to be the score, but we keep talking about effort and cohesion, concentration, application to the basic fundamentals. If Manly win 30-18, 36-26, whatever, just do your jobs and the fans can at least take something away from the game. I just worry, though, that, look, at the end of the day, rugby league's a 17-man game, sometimes 18 these days. And there's too many blokes out there that are running on fumes and play a certain way because they don't know any other. And like I said, it's not the first 5 minutes I worry about. It's huge parts of games, massive chunks of games where they lose the games because they're conceding not just tries and field position, knock-ons, individual decisions, defensive reads, Ben Hunt bombs that go nowhere, the fact they get lost on third, fourth tackle, the rotation of their team sometimes. It's all these little things. The fact that some of these players are still playing out of position and it sounds like they're going to stay in those spots. There's all these little things that they need to fix, and some of them, Flanagan can't go out there and play for them. And it's easy to go back and review it and say, you should have done this and should have done that. But how do you get them to change? How do you get them to change what they've been taught to do, which is look good for 5 minutes and then fall out for 15 and just give up games? It's a really tough one. So back to your question, I need to see across the board, starting with the forward pack, just get into the game and stay in the game. If they can stay in the game, keep Manly honest, and fans will be happy with that. But I just don't know if they can do it.
Yeah, have to be more physically impressive because you can't be playing against side and letting them make 10 or 12 metres off each run. You saw it too many times against the Cowboys. Saw it happen a load of times against the Dolphins. They've got to try and come up with some physical attribute to try and stop sides just marching down the ground, because it doesn't matter what you do when you got the football in your hands. If you're conceding that through the middle and getting dominated through the ruck, then it's going to be a tough old evening for the Red V. Afraid I've picked them for a win each of the first 3 weeks. I can't bet for the Dragons this week. I think Manly going to be far too strong with their vaunted attack and the fact that the Dragons do look so brittle at the back. But like Kurt said, hopefully we see a bit of a response and a side that at least attempts to stay with the Sea Eagles for the full 80 minutes down there at Wollongong. Fingers crossed that won't be too much carnage as the Dragons take on Manly. Manly, of course, broke that streak at Wollongong. I completely forgot about that. Much like with everything in 2023, I tried to wipe it from my mind with anything's Dragon related, but of course they did break that streak down at Wollongong, Manly, but still have a horrid record down there, and let's hope the Dragons can pull one back over them on Saturday night. That's all of the match preview done here on the Red V podcast. We're going to take one more break, and then we're going to have a little chat with Kyan Hjalmarsson, who is a young hooker coming through the Dragons system. Had a good chat with Kyan a little bit earlier this afternoon. We'll talk to him about the win for the Jersey Fleek side over the weekend, and then after that we'll wrap up all the lower grade results and answer your fans' corner questions here in episode 219 of the Red V podcast.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Welcome back to the Red V podcast. Jack Clifton and Curtis Woodward guiding you through all the latest about the mighty St George Illawarra Dragons. Well, if you're a keen follower of the Dragons, and you may have seen a big win for the Jersey Flegg under 21 boys who had a big win over the Fijian Sealtails on the weekend. They actually played as the curtain raiser prior to first grade there at Cogra. And their young hooker, Kian Hajallison, has been good enough to give up some time this afternoon, jumping on the podcast to chat to us about that victory on the weekend, but also, some of his hopes and dreams and goals for season 2024. Kian, great to have you on the podcast, mate. How are you travelling this afternoon?
Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure, Kian. I guess first and foremost, a really good win for your boys on the weekend. A pretty big response considering, it was a pretty poor performance the week earlier against Newcastle. How did, you rate it from your point of view, but also how did the coaching staff feel with that performance on Saturday afternoon?
No, it was good. Sort of just simplified everyone's roles down. We had good patience in the first bit, I thought. And then, Fiji sort of struggled to go with this in the back end of both halves. But, the coaching staff was happy actually. And then, boys just really bought in this week and it was good vibe at training and, good to get a win again.
It's probably not a very often occurrence that the under-21 side in the Jersey Flegg competition, you get a chance to play a curtain raiser before first grade, but also get a chance to play like on an NRL field like Cogra Oval with a few fans streaming in that wanted to see some footy before first grade obviously started. What was that like from your perspective?
Oh, it was heaps good. A few more people than what we're used to getting to the games. But even the field was excellent to play on. We don't get the best field sometimes, but that was definitely good to play on there.
You've played a little bit of Jersey Flegg. Some fans that have obviously followed your journey would have known that you played a little bit of Jersey Flegg last year in the starting positions this year in that dummy half role. How have you found the season so far, Kian, and how are you kind of finding it in that Jersey Flegg system, I guess, compared to kind of playing like your Maddie's Cup and your SG Ball and those kinds of things that you've done throughout the years?
I'm finding it good, just compared to how Mass and SG Ball. So I think just every level just gets quicker. But this year, finding it a bit more comfortable. Definitely not easier, but more comfortable just with finding your own voice and things like that. And backing yourself a little bit more.
Have you got hopes and goals for the season, Kian? Obviously in Jersey Flegg and playing at a high level there, but do you have aspirations and goals for this season, but I guess also kind of moving down the track as well?
I haven't really set any goals, but just for me, just take every week as it comes. And if you're putting your best foot forward every week, you're going to progress. And that's sort of how I take it.
Have you had many interactions, I guess, as part of that Jersey Flegg squad with any of the first grade guys or Shane Flanagan or any of the coaching staff there? Has anything happened like that, or is it kind of more staying in your own lane with the Jersey Flegg side?
Sort of more staying in our own lane with the Jersey Flegg side, but we've got a couple cup boys that train with us, like Tommy Freeman and that are a bit more experienced and good to chat to.
I guess. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess when you look at the end of 2024, Kian, premiership probably is the main goal. Is that every player wants to win a premiership. What are you hoping for this Jersey Flegg side to achieve in 2024, mate?
Oh, definitely a grand final. I think if we're all staying fit and on the field and just keep building, I do think we can have a good push in the semis. Just about finding our rhythm and staying composed, I guess.
For those that don't know too much about you, Kian, I guess a kind of a double question here. What kind of player are you? And could you tell us a little bit about, I guess, your background in rugby league and where you played your junior footy and how you've kind of got to this position playing in the number 9 role for the Dragons in the Jersey Flegg?
I'm more of a running hooker. I can play half and can play a little bit of lock, a bit more of a utility. Started playing when I was 4, just through my brother and his mates. They were always playing down the oval. So I got sort of brought into it by that. Played at Albion Park for 7 years, I think. Was at Kiama for 2, and then I've played my rest of my juniors in first grade with Western Suburbs in Fig Tree there. Played Hard Mats, played Laurie Daly Cup, SG Ball, and then now in Jersey Flag, just trying to continue going up the levels and hopefully make it one day.
Yeah, well, we certainly hope so. I know there's plenty of fans that are cheering you guys on and want to see the best from you guys at a personal level, but also as at a team level as well. And Kyan, we hope to see plenty of performances like your boys put forward against the Silktails on the weekend. Thanks so much for dropping by the podcast, mate, and best of luck for the rest of the 2024 season.
Thank you very much.
Big thanks to Kyan for jumping on the podcast this week. Nice to have a bit of a chat about what has been happening in his career to date, and also the fine performance of the Jersey Flegg side on the weekend. Talking of that Jersey Flegg side, they had a big win against the Fijian Silktails on the weekend, as you would have heard in our chat with Kyan. After losing in round 2 against the Newcastle Knights, it was a really good bounce back from the Dragons. They'll actually take on the Manly Seagulls this week in round 4. So down at Mick Crennan Oval on Saturday morning, the Dragons doing battle with Manly there as they look to make it 3 wins out of 4. They've had a bit of success in recent years in the under-21 competition, so they'll be looking to continue that. It's a wonderful old ground, Mick Crennan Oval down there in Gerringong. If you're down in that lovely part of the world, maybe even head a little bit further south to see that, and can come back up and watch the Dragons a little bit later on in the afternoon. But they find themselves in a pretty good position at the moment, the Dragons, in the Jersey Flegg Cup competition. Of course, wanting to continue that this week. Currently, as the table stands, the Dragons in 3rd position, 2 wins and a defeat. They've scored 90 points, conceded 54 for a differential of 36. They'll look to keep that going against the Manly side, who has an identical record. They've won 2 and lost 1 as well, as the Red V look to keep things going there. If we move down to the SG Ball competition, the St George Dragons, they had a big win on the weekend. They thumped Canberra 54-16 at Foreshore Rugby Park at Sylvania. A wonderful performance by the Dragons there that puts them in a great position to play finals footy. They now sit with 6 wins and 2 losses with a differential of 112. They're second on 12. They won't be able to catch the Roosters, who are top on 16. The Knights are also on 12, and then you've got the Bulldogs on 11, and then the Eels and the Steelers both on 10 competition points currently, within the Magpies and Sharks 9, and the Raiders down in 9th position on 8 points. So still a couple of games to go for these sides. The Dragons have a tough trip away from home against the New Zealand Warriors over there in Auckland. So that's going to be, I think a real test of the mettle of the Dragons in this competition. They've played some really good football, and they'll be looking to keep that going. So that'll be happening on Sunday in Pukekohe. A 9:45am kickoff there for the Dragons, which is 11:45 New Zealand time. Meanwhile, the Steelers play Saturday afternoon at the Collegian Sporting Complex, a 3 o'clock kickoff against the North Sydney Bears. Illawarra looking to keep their finals hopes alive after a disappointing defeat on the weekend. They went down in comprehensive fashion to the Bulldogs by 46 points to 16. So this is the final round before the semi-finals, so the Steelers need to win that to keep their finals hopes alive. Meanwhile, for the Dragons, effectively guaranteed a final spot, but would love to win to wrap up second spot on the competition table, and finish with a big away win there over the Warriors. Both the Matthews Cup sides unable to play finals footy this year. They'll be playing for a little bit of pride over the course of the weekend. Also in round 9 action, the Steelers take on the Bears at 1:30, and the Dragons take on the Warriors at 8 o'clock in that early fixture. Just quickly before we finish up this wrap, just taking a look at the ladders for the women's competitions, especially in the Tasha Gale Cup and the Lisa Fiola Cup. Illawarra are killing it in both of those competitions. The Steelers currently top of the table in the Tasha Gale Women's Cup competition. 7 wins, no losses, and a bye. They've only conceded 24 points in 7 games. It's been a remarkable season for them. They've got the Sydney Roosters and Ditches Academy on 14, and the Bulldogs on 14, nipping at their heels, but their differential of 282 probably is going to be enough for them to finish on top spot there with only one round remaining. And then in the Lisa Fiola Cup, the Steelers currently second, just behind the Bulldogs, who are on 16 in top spot. The Steelers have won 6, lost 1, and had a bye, and even in that competition have only conceded 78 points from 7 games. They take on the Sharks this week in what will be a double header in both the Tasha Gale Cup and Lisa Fiola Cup action over the weekend. So 12 o'clock for the Tasha Gale Cup at Collegiate Sporting Complex, and the Lisa Fiola Cup just prior to that. And forgot to mention, in the New South Wales Cup, the Dragons did have a bye last week, and they find themselves back in action with the televised game on Foxtel, on Fox League this weekend. The Dragons are taking on the Seagulls, the Blacktown Workers Seagulls. So the Dragons, after a nice win against the Newcastle prior to the bye, looking to get another 2 competition points there. Of course, that match is the curtain raiser prior to first grade between St George and Manly. And we'll run through the side that has been named by the Dragons. Matt Fierney is fullback, Sione Finau on one wing, Christian Tuipulotu is the other. Max Fierney and Ben Johnson in the centres. 5'8" Josh Ralph. The half is Jonah Glover. Alec Tuivasa and Toby Couchman, the props, with Conor Malazan named to start in the hooker role. Dylan Egan and Ryan Couchman in the second row, with Dan Russell locking the scrum. Harley Finau, Jackson Sherab, Josh Corrick, and Ben Murdoch-Masila in jersey 22 with Tom Freebarn as a replacement. But there's a chance that maybe guys like Villian Fafita and Michael Mole might drop down as well to bolster the Dragons' stock there as they look to get a victory over the Seagulls there on Saturday afternoon. So that does wrap up all of the lower grades for the Dragons, and best of luck to all of the sides that are taking place this weekend. Well, let's finish off the podcast by dissecting all the latest Fans Corner questions. We've got a bunch of them, so we'll run through them relatively quickly so we don't bore you too much with what we're talking about. But our first question comes from Paolo Festa, and Paolo has said, could you please comment on our kicking game? It is the worst in the NRL. Hunt keeps kicking upwards on last tackle, which is so predictable, and the kick is not even that high and gives us no chance to chase and pressure the opposition. We give opposition fullbacks so much time every time and every game. Does Flanagan have a higher or longer kick? Maybe even Zach Lomax. We should kick to the corners and chase hard. Yeah, your thoughts on that, Kurt?
Oh, man. Great question. I've been talking about this a long time. So I've been waiting for this question all night. I think this has more to do with, and like I said, I've said this a bunch about Ben Hunt and the Dragons, that they get lost on the field, especially mid-set and into the last tackle options, where kind of Ben Hunt's kicks aren't really doing anything. They're not for field position, and it isn't an all-out attacking kick either. They're not chasing points. I'd much rather see them run the ball and everyone on the same page. If that's the option down that right hand side, and it's kind of chip bomb, you look at someone. If you look at the likes of Cleary, Moses, and I think Mitchell Pearce at the Roosters used to cop a little bit of guff for his kicking style in field, because a lot of his kicks were clearing bombs for field position, but he could put it on a dime where he wanted it. So and that's the problem with the Dragons, because they get so lost that they don't know where they're going. If you look at Cleary or Moses, they kick high a lot as well, but they are doing it from a little further back down the field.
Yeah.
And everyone knows why they are kicking the ball. It's a higher, longer kick, and it's put exactly where they want to put it. And that is far more dangerous, that floating torpedo, because even if you are kicking further down the field, you're getting so much height on the ball and hang time, is that your defenders, your chasers are still getting there at the same time as Ben Hunt, if he puts up his little chip bombs, or whatever you want to call them. Because and then the other thing too is that the style of kick as well. It is now an art form to be able to kick the ball like a Matt Burton, or you know, the hitting the guts of the ball and getting the ball to move in different ways. A lot of Ben Hunt's kicks are kind of like a last play, last solution thing, because they've got stuck. They don't know what they're doing, and then it's an end over end kick anyway. So it's kind of like a couple of fingers in a couple of different pies and kind of hedging your bets. And even though they are further down the field, it comes back to the new adage, if you want to call it a new adage, that defending teams would rather much defend against you closer to their own try line than back down midfield or further back down the field. You ask a fullback or a winger, would they rather be defending a Matt Burton skyscraper floating around in the air, or a Ben Hunt end over end, kind of nothing, not even a bomb, closer down to you're basically in a one-on-one most of the time because they're coming forward as well. It's easier to take the ball and defend it, defend the kick because you have momentum. So all Ben Hunt's doing is admitting that the Dragons don't have enough different structures or different game plans as they go down the field. Look, I'm not saying that the Panthers or the Eels, or only specifically mentioning them because of the two halfbacks I mentioned, but if Nathan Cleary is kicking from halfway, or Matt Burton for the Bulldogs when they bring him centre field for one of those huge kicks, they're doing it because they know where they are on the field and they know. Like, obviously, if they see a short side, they might run it and score, or if there's a break, they change what they're doing. I think sometimes the Dragons get the third tackle, and instead of thinking we need to keep playing football and break the defence down with players in motion, using the ball, shifting the play, shifting our players around the field, they get the third tackle and say, all right, we'll run two more this way, and then Ben can kick for the corner with one of his kicks. I think it's more of a result, and it's a window into their attack more than anything else, and how far away they are from the top teams when it comes to moving the ball downfield. And when option one's not working out, they've got B, C, D, E, and F. So really good question. I hope I answered it anyway.
Yeah, did a very good job of it. Yeah, I get very tired of the kicking game of the Dragons, and I'm a bit old school. I still think if you can find the grass and you can make the fullback have to wait and go and pick up the ball, go back towards their own goal line, then it's going to give your defence a chance to really turn things around. But that's just our opinion. But great question, Paolo. I hope it was answered. To perfection there by Kurt Woodward. Next question from Vic Sophios, and Vic has said, Jack and Curtis, do you think this team is progressing, or was round one just a one-off? The way the Tigers played on the weekend, they will beat us easily next time we play. I think the team is progressing, but I think it's going to be, as we mentioned, slowly. I think it was a bit of a false dawn with what we saw against the Titans in round one. I think it's going to be a struggle this year as Flanagan tries to get the best out of these players, and there's a fair few of them that probably aren't up to the standard that they need to be. I still think the team will gradually progress throughout the season. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Kurt.
I'll be quick on this one. And some great names coming through tonight. Paolo and Vic Sophios. It's great stuff. I think the biggest difference between the Dragons and West Tigers on the weekend was West Tigers looked like they were playing for each other on both sides of the ball. They were digging in and made a contest of every play, where the Dragons just aren't doing that at the moment, unfortunately. And I hope they get better. They have to get better. There's no way they can get any worse than they did last week. So the only way is up for the Dragons, and hopefully they take a step in the right direction this weekend.
Next question comes from Dom Ewan, and Dom has said, sorry, but Ben Hunt isn't a good captain of the club. Hunt giving advice to Lomax about playing in a different position, in inverted commas, for the good of the team and honouring his contract is the biggest joke ever. He's not exactly leading by example on both fronts. Saying whatever I said didn't matter just shows that players don't respect him either. Now, I think this is a great statement from Dom, because I think, that I'm not saying that's the cause of all the issues at the club at the moment and the performances on the field, but if you've got someone there that's captain that you don't really respect because of the way they've acted, and he acted deplorably last year as captain, and not just as a representative of the club, but also as a captain as well, and then kind of, I don't want to say getting on his moral high horse, but then kind of saying, well, yeah, with Zach Orr, you need to play in a different position for the good of the team, when Ben Hunt hasn't done that himself. I think that can cause some issues and push some noses out of joint, Kurt.
Look, let's talk about body language. That game against the Dolphins, where it kind of all went to shit in round two, can't remember who he threw the ball to, but it was a forward pass, and I think that the forward knocked on as well. And they kind of just looked at each other. I would much rather see Ben Hunt and his players around him have a bit more pride. So if they lose the ball, show some emotion. Get up and say, look, I'm sorry, boys. Or look, if something goes wrong and someone's out of position or something doesn't go right, there's a difference between abusing each other on the field and being constructive on the field. The last 2 weeks, the body language of the players when there's a mistake or something goes wrong, there's nothing. It's poker face stuff. I want to see some emotion from the players, but that starts with Ben Hunt. To get back to the question, I think on the field he needs to be a little bit more proactive with his body language, and that will trickle down. Is it too late? Maybe, but they've been picked again to play this week, so they've got to play. They've got to play some footy and like I said, some body language, some positive body language on the weekend. Whether it is, like I said, after a mistake and someone's run the wrong line or, someone's thrown a forward pass when they should have held the ball, stuff like that. Get stuck in. Not have a go at each other, but get stuck in and show some positive, show some emotion for the fans.
Johnny Drama has written in and said, do you guys agree unless we can win a decent share of games to place maybe 10th, it's only going to make it harder to attract decent talent over the next 2 years? Do we find ourselves only relying on the next big hope coming through the grades because we can't attract an Adam Fanua-Blake or Harlem Lukey, etc.?
Look, I'll throw this back to you, but real quickly, they're going to get players to the club because NRL players like money. Money talks. The problem is if they keep going the way they're going, if they want to play, they're going to have to pay massive overs, which is probably something that they're thinking already. That it's the NRL. There's only 17 clubs and there's X amount of players, but I think they can attract players. They're probably just going to have to pay more.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a false narrative that players don't want to come to clubs that haven't been successful on the field. Like Kurt said, I think money plays a big part in a lot of decisions, and I think also the coach does as well. I think Shane Flanagan is a premiership winning coach, and there'd be a lot of players that would like to play under a premiership winning coach. So obviously the Dragons winning some games would probably help improve that of players coming, but I still think there'll be a bunch of players that want to come. I think Luciano Lua is a good signing, and he didn't turn his nose up at the Dragons. I know it's his former club and it's his local club and those kinds of things, but I still think there's going to be, I wouldn't say players lining up to play for the Dragons, but I still think there's going to be a fair few that they're going to want to come to the club because the Dragons actually have a lot of cap space as well. So that's obviously in the advantage as well. And maybe you overpay for a few of those guys, and then the results start to come a little bit more easier, and then you can kind of get back to paying market value for some of these players and get some really quality guys in there. So I think ideally it'd be great if the Dragons win 11 or 12 games and finish in 9th or 10th, and players are lining up, but I don't necessarily think that's vital for Flanagan to be signing quality players over the next couple of years. The Kink on Twitter has said, after listening to Richo on the Byron podcast, where he talks about governance being critical, do you ever see a future where our board decides it wants to act truly interested in the best interest of the club? Such an interesting conversation around how clubs should be run. Well, the short answer is no. I don't think management gives a stuff about the Dragons. I think they're happy to let mediocrity run riot. The Shane Flanagan decision for mine, even though he is a wonderful coach and I'm glad he's at the club, I feel like that was a move by the Dragons board and Dragons management to appease fans because fans were coming after them. Fans were talking about the board a lot, and there was newspaper articles were starting to pop up, and those people in the boardroom who have been there for a long time, everyone knows about how long a lot of those guys have been in there. They were probably getting worried about their jobs, but I don't think they do. I don't think they care about the club. I think Craig Young showed how much he cared about the club, that he was willing to drag the club through the mud to support his mate's son that was going through a criminal proceeding. That shows how much someone that says he loves the club did for the Dragons. So no, I think it's a really good question, probably one of the best questions we've got on the podcast before. But I think that's the thing. Richo wanted to come to the Dragons. He wanted to come in and change things, but the Dragons knew that if that happened, that skeletons were going to be brought out of cupboards and cobwebs are going to be cleared and old men were going to be pushed off to the retirement home, and they didn't want that.
Yeah, look, did I hear the Dragons the other day, or there was a report of how well they're doing financially off the field
that was from the members forum. Yeah, that's because that's kind of the main thing that Ryan Webb says. Yeah, because we're awful on the field, there's nothing really to talk about what we're doing. It's all about how financially viable the club is.
Yeah. Okay. So at the end of the day, there is a difference between investment in your club, the future, making money, and or saving money. So they're very good at saving money or reporting back to whoever wants to listen that they're doing a great job with the front office. But is the club in a way lying to itself in its own little echo chamber? Because to me, the NRL is about winning premierships. Everything else flows on from that. If you invest in that, you win comps, everything else flows on. You're going to make money if you win premierships. It's simple as that. I just wonder, when was the last time, Jack, do you think the club sat back and said, we're a chance of winning this comp this year, or we're a top four side, we're a heavyweight of the NRL? Or is it just about that bottom line and making the club viable off-field? Because
I think it's the latter. What's
the point of it?
Well, and that's what I've said in the podcast before. What's the point of being involved with an NRL club if you're just going to piss everything away and not want the best for the club? And that's been the case. 2018 was probably the last time that you could sit back and think, well, the Dragons have a good roster. They have a roster that's capable of rattling a few cages of the top sides and playing semi-final football. And since then, there's been zero ambition at all. There's the fact of the matter is that the governance of the club, it might be fine in the sense that they're getting good turnover and finances and everything's looking kind of great in that column. But at the end of the day, the Dragons have been awful. They've been awful on the field. They've been awful off the field. Ryan Webb's come up before and said there's been no culture issues at the Dragons. Well, I don't have enough fingers to count all of the off-field things that have happened at the Dragons. So that shows to me that there is a pretty big culture problem at the Dragons. So it's not just the on-field performance being awful, it's been off-field, and that trickles down from the top. It's what Jack Gibson says, winning starts in the front office. And the front office now is very different to what it was like in 1985. And I think a fair few of these dinosaurs are stuck in yesteryear and what St. George did in the 80s and the 90s, and they need to jump in a time machine and come forward to the 21st century, because if things keep going like this, then the club will just continue to be an abject failure like it has for the last decade.
Play on.
Next question comes from James Savage. He said, guys, at what point do we throw caution to the wind and give some young guys a crack? As I mentioned yesterday, if Galvin at 18 can hold his own in first grade, I don't see why a number of guys who are older than him shouldn't be ready. What are your thoughts on this, Kirk? Because I know, obviously, being a Tigers fan, and Lockie Galvin's looked really good in his first couple of games. Is it a case of kind of age at times when someone's ready, or other times do you just kind of know that there's someone there that can play first grade? And I guess what do you think about James' comments in regards to younger players being around that might be able to be thrust into NRL action?
See, look, I thought at the start of the year Marshke wasn't going to get a run till mid-year. I thought Leilua was going to need a month of fitness. Proven wrong on both them. So Flanagan's not worried. He's obviously got some ideas in his head. But do you have someone like Galvin that is kind of in that caliber where, they keep saying if he's good enough, he's old enough? Do you have someone like that ready to go? Is there someone there, Jack, that I don't know about?
in relation to what James is talking about, he's talking about Ben Rumble, who's the young fullback that scored 4 tries and had about 3 try assists for the 21s in the win against the Silktails on the weekend. He kind of thinks he's an option to be promoted to the top 30 and get a chance to play first grade. I don't really have an opinion too much on Ben Rumble. I don't think he's necessarily ready for first grade, and when I say ready, I just don't think he's at the level that you probably need to be to have success at first grade. I could be completely wrong on that, but yeah, I don't think there are. I think the Couchmans are guys that are first grade level. I think Villian Fafita is first grade level, but outside of those guys, I just don't think there's much around. I just think the development has really stagnated in the last 4 or 5 years, and I just don't think there's many players around the Dragons system at the moment that Loco Tonga's probably one. He's only 18. I would love to see him given a chance, but I feel like the Dragons do take this very cautious approach as well.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So, look, I'll have to back what you're saying there, Jack. But, look, if there's a guy that potentially deserves a crack or you think he might be part of your future, the season's not gone yet. It is only round 4. But I'd be very interested to see truly what Flanagan sees out of some of these guys coming up through the ranks. They don't have to play every week from, say, round 10 to the end of the year. You can, progress them a little bit quicker by giving them some first-grade minutes and give them some confidence. But if you're the coach, do you want to bring anyone into this team right now, and will it affect them more long-term? And should they be thrown into the lion's den like that, into the furnace, and will that hurt them more long term? So, and I think
Flanagan will play some of these younger guys, especially later in the year. We've already seen him give a couple of debuts to different players and those kinds of things. So I think he's open to that. But yeah, probably more in what you're saying, Kurt. Don't want to throw them to the wolves straight away. And I think towards the back end of the season, we might see a Loco Tonga or a Hayden Buchanan or Hamish Stewart or like Dylan Egan. Some of these guys get some opportunities.
Yeah, I hope so. If it keeps going the way it's going, that they have to do something different. And if there is an eye on next year and the year after, they're going to have to start playing some and getting some fresh blood into that team.
And the last question comes from Adam Brown, and Adam has said, the team seemed incredibly slow off the line last Saturday, and at the same time, our play-the-ball speed was glacial. How much of this is technical, i.e. wrestling and tackling, versus fitness and attitude versus relaxed refereeing towards ruck infringements?
Attitude first, attitude second, and attitude third.
And the Dragons don't have that at all at the moment, do they, Kurt?
No. And look, you can talk around it and like I said before, you can get analytical and break it all down, but I think right now Dragons fans have had enough of all that. They've just got to get into the game. And look, all the teams train the same. All the teams have to play under the same refs. All the teams have all the technical training in the world. It's just who's got it between the ears on any given weekend. And look, I think the case in point is that the Cowboys showed up at Cogra on Saturday, and like we said before, I think maybe they just thought they were going to steamroll them from minute one, and kind of had to fire up a little bit and go up maybe one gear from second to third gear and get the win, and they did it easily. So I think right now, mentally, I think it's all about attitude for the Dragons, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it is. That's the big key, and that's the struggle that Shane Flanagan's going to have to try and improve this attitude of the Dragons to get the best out of his side, and hopefully he can do it quick and turn things around with a big match against the Manly on Saturday night. That does wrap up our Fans Corner questions. Big thanks to some awesome questions from some very bright football brains here tonight, so a huge thanks to everyone that did send their questions in. As always, you can flick them across to us, redvpodcast@gmail.com. And Kurt, before we finish, we do need to announce the Who Am I a little bit earlier tonight. We spoke about this particular individual. Played 80 first-grade games across his career between 1995 to 2001. He spent 3 years at the St George Dragons in 95, 96 and 1997, where he played 28 games and scored 3 tries. He then went across to St Helens in 1998 with 8 tries in 22 games and finished his professional rugby league career at the North Queensland Cowboys between 1999 and 2001. He played centre. He could also play wing and also played fullback. He was a Moray Bears junior. He also attended Ipswich Grammar School before being signed by the St George Dragons, and now happily lives back up in Queensland. Kurt, an idea of who you think the Who Am I is tonight?
Full disclosure, Jack, I did Google him, but not for the reason to get the result or get the answer. He did have a 2000 Cowboys card.
Did he?
I've got it. I've got it. I'm going to find it. But, yeah, I just remember that name for some reason, but I'll let you announce that to the Red V listeners.
Yes, the Who Am I for this week is a former outside back for the St George Dragons, St Helens, and the North Queensland Cowboys, Damien Smith. Spent 3 years at the Dragons between 95 and 97. He was part of the 96 squad that went to the grand final against Manly. He only played 10 games that season and played a fair bit in reserve grade, but then was a bit of a mainstay in 1997 where he played 17 games for the Dragons that season and then had spells at St Helens and back up into his native Queensland with the North Queensland Cowboys. Damien Smith, the Who Am I this week, and hopefully Damien's doing well. I think he does follow us on social media, so I hope Damien's doing well as he celebrates birthday number 50 a little bit later this year. Kurt, brings us to the end of the podcast, mate. As always, pleasure chatting footy with you, brother, and looking forward to do it all again next week. Hopefully both our sides can give us something to cheer about over the weekend. My side probably more so than your side, mate, but they take on a Mitch Moseless Parramatta Eels and maybe a missing Bryce Cartwright as well. So I'm sure there's going to be a few Dragons cheering on your Tigers this weekend, mate. Thanks for jumping on the podcast yet again.
Fingers crossed, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, fingers crossed really is the theme, as we've got our fingers crossed that the Dragons might be able to pull something out of the fire against Manly on Saturday night down there at Wollongong. We'll be back for a brand new episode for next week on the Red V podcast. But until then, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. On behalf of Curtis Woodward, I've been Jack Clifton. Let's go those mighty Dragons.
Sports Social Podcast Network.